Why was she the only one standing? The others had already left the briefing room, the chairs pushed back, papers scattered, coffee still steaming where nervous hands had left it. She remained there, shoulders square, eyes fixed on the empty wall where the map had been. She didn't blink, didn't move, almost as if she knew, once she stepped out, once she left this room, her life would never belong to her again. And maybe that was the point. The hallway outside buzzed with footsteps, radios, the clatter of hurried men and women packing gear they might never unpack again. War had a way of making sound feel heavier. Every voice, every command carried urgency. But she stayed, alone, silent, a shadow in uniform. They hadn't chosen her, not really, she chose herself. The mission was never written with her name. It was scribbled into existence by desperation, signed by those who still believed in winning something, even if it wasn't the war itself, but just one moment, 1 inch of ground, one flag not trampled by the dirt of surrender. She had volunteered, her hand raised not in pride but in defiance. And when the commander nodded, she felt both the weight and the release. Because volunteering meant control, even if it was control of the end. Her boots finally echoed against the tile, slow, measured, each step a decision. Outside, the sky broke open with sunlight, the kind that never felt warm in a war zone. Dust shimmered in the air, swirling around vehicles lined like bones. She pulled her cap lower, tightened the strap of her pack, and let her eyes drift across the faces of those watching her pass. No one spoke. Some looked down. Others straightened, like a silent salute not meant for ceremony but for acknowledgement. She wasn't famous. She wasn't high-ranking. She didn't carry medals on her chest. What she carried was quieter, a history no one else knew. And there it was again, that question that refused to leave her mind. Why me? Why am I the one carrying this? She knew the answer, she just didn't want to say it out loud. Not yet. The convoy rolled forward, tires grinding on gravel, a chorus of engines masking the whispers of doubt in her chest. Inside the armored vehicle, she pressed her back against the cold steel, fingers wrapped tightly around a folded piece of cloth hidden inside her vest. The flag, not large, not ceremonial, personal, stitched with care by hands that trembled when they gave it to her. Her throat tightened. She closed her eyes, and for just a moment she wasn't here. She was back home. A kitchen table, the smell of bread, a hand across hers, the sound of laughter that had faded too soon. That flag was the last thing he gave her before he boarded his final flight, and now she carried it where he could not. The others in the vehicle shifted, checking weapons, adjusting straps, swallowing fear in small gulps. One of them, a younger soldier with dirt still etched into the lines of his face, leaned toward her. "You don't have to do this," he whispered, as if breaking the silence was itself a violation. She didn't answer. She just looked at him long enough for him to see the truth in her eyes. This wasn't about choice anymore. The convoy jolted to a stop. Dust rose, cloaking the view. Doors slammed open. Commands barked. They moved quickly, a swarm of motion spreading into formation. She stepped out, boots sinking into earth that smelled of gunpowder and heat. The air pressed heavy against her lungs. Ahead, the ruins of a village sprawled like broken teeth, walls scarred by fire, windows hollow. The silence here wasn't peace. It was a warning. Her grip tightened on the strap of her pack. Every step forward felt like a conversation with ghosts. She imagined them watching from shattered doorways, from rooftops where shadows lingered. She imagined their whispers. Why her? She kept walking. The squad fanned out, rifles raised, eyes scanning alleys that seemed too narrow, too quiet. The radio crackled half words, half static. The commander's voice low, sharp. "Remember why we're here. Hold the line. Don't break." She almost laughed bitterly. Don't break. If only he knew how often she had already broken inside. But none of them had seen it. None of them knew what it cost to stand again, to piece herself back together when grief tried to hollow her out. At the center of the square, a flagpole bent under years of neglect. The cloth once tied to it was gone, shredded, scattered. Only rust remained and a silence thick enough to drown in. That's where she was heading. That's what no one else wanted. The young soldier from before followed close, his voice low, trembling. They'll be watching us, waiting. This is suicide. She didn't argue, he wasn't wrong. But she stepped forward anyway. A crack of gunfire split the air. The squad dropped instantly, bodies pressed against rubble, weapons snapping toward unseen windows. Shouts cut through the chaos. Contact, left flank, keep low. She didn't move, didn't flinch. The bullet hadn't been meant for her, but it was close enough to sing past her shoulder, close enough to feel the air it displaced. And still, she rose higher, standing against the storm. Because this wasn't about surviving, this was about meaning. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat that matched the rattle of rifles. Her ears rang with the chaos of war, but inside there was only one sound she heard, his voice. That last night, that last promise. Carry it, no matter what happens, carry it for me. So she did. From her vest she pulled the folded flag, hands steady though her breath betrayed her. She shook it once, twice, the colors catching the harsh light, and then she began to walk. Across open ground, through the gunfire, past the shouting. Every step echoed, not in sound but in weight, sacrifice, dignity, unspoken strength. The squad shouted her name, ordered her back, cursed under their breath because they knew what it meant to watch someone walk into history. She didn't stop, didn't run, didn't hide. At the base of the flagpole, bullets striking the ground around her, she tied the cloth with fingers that never trembled. And when she stepped back for just one heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. The flag lifted with the wind, defiant against the smoke. And in that moment, she wasn't just carrying his memory. She was carrying all of them. The radio crackled again, frantic voices demanding orders, demanding reason. But she stood still, her gaze locked on the fabric swaying above her head. And she whispered words no one else heard. This is for you, all of you. The young soldier crouched nearby, wide-eyed, torn between admiration and terror. He shook his head, muttered under his breath, she's insane, but he couldn't look away. None of them could. The firefight raged on. The squad returned fire, pinned down, desperate to hold. And through it all she remained upright, a silhouette against chaos. She wasn't bulletproof, she wasn't invincible, but in that moment she was untouchable. Because sometimes dignity doesn't need to speak, it simply acts. And yet beneath the silence of her stance, there was something else, something no one else knew. She wasn't just carrying the flag for them, she was carrying a secret. One that, if revealed, would change everything. Why didn't she duck? That's what the squad kept asking themselves later. Why didn't she hit the dirt when the bullets tore past? Why didn't she listen when they shouted, begged, cursed her name into the smoke? She could have lived easier that way. She could have made it simple, but nothing about her had ever been simple. The firefight stretched into minutes that felt like hours. Gunfire rattled off walls, the smell of cordite thick in the air. The squad fought like they were drowning, every breath a gasp between shots. And there she was still standing, still watching that flag whip in the wind. It wasn't courage, at least not the kind they thought. It was something deeper, something heavier. The young soldier, crouched behind broken stone, risked a glance toward her. His throat was raw from shouting at her to move. But he caught it then, the look in her eyes. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't recklessness. It was farewell. She didn't plan on walking back. The squad's commander barked into the radio, demanding air support, backup, anything. The response came back sharp, flat, final. Negative. No assets available. You're on your own. On your own. The words settled like iron. The squad huddled tighter behind cover, exchanging glances that spoke more than words could. Fear, anger, a silent question. Would they all die here in this forgotten square just to protect a piece of cloth? She finally moved. Slow, deliberate steps back toward them. her face unreadable, jaw clenched. When she dropped behind the rubble wall, her breathing was steady, controlled, as if she hadn't just walked through a storm of lead. The young soldier couldn't help himself. "Are you insane? You could have been killed." Her eyes flicked to him, calm and piercing. "Could have?" she asked, almost quietly, almost like she was testing the word on her tongue. Then she said nothing more. The squad fell into a rhythm. Suppress. Move. Cover. Advance. Every block was a new fight, every doorway a gamble. Their world shrank to angles, shadows, seconds of decision. And through it all, she carried the silence of someone whose war had started long before this mission. That night when the shooting finally dimmed and the world bled into a tense quiet, they gathered in the shell of a house. Crumbling walls, roof half gone, stars framed by fire-blackened beams. The kind of night sky that felt cruelly beautiful, vast and eternal above lives so fragile. They lit no fire. No one wanted to be a silhouette. Rations passed from hand to hand, chewed without taste, eyes heavy but unwilling to close. She sat apart, her back against the broken frame of a window. The flag lay folded across her lap, her fingers tracing its edges as though it were skin. The young soldier broke the silence first, his voice small, almost apologetic. "Who was it for, the flag?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she tilted her head, listening to something only she could hear. Finally, she spoke, not looking at him, not looking at anyone. "For someone who never came home." The words settled heavy. No one asked more. They didn't need to. But later, when most of them dozed in uneasy half-sleep, she whispered to herself. A name. Soft, fragile, the kind of word you say only when you're afraid of breaking it. And the young soldier lying closest to her heard it. He didn't repeat it, didn't dare, but it stayed with him, because the way she said it, it wasn't just grief, it was guilt. The next morning broke harsh and gray. Clouds swallowed the sun. The air felt damp, restless. They moved again, step by step, through streets that smelled of ash and rot. The silence of the village pressed against them, thicker than the gunfire of the day before. She walked at the front, not by order, by presence. Every corner they turned, they expected the snap of rifles, the thunder of ambush. Every door they passed, they imagined eyes watching from the dark. And still, she moved with a steadiness that unsettled them, as though she wasn't afraid of what was ahead, as though she was afraid of nothing. But inside she was afraid, not of death, not of bullets, but of failing what she had promised. The guilt gnawed at her step by step. She remembered his voice the night before he left, his laughter tired but unbroken, his hand pressed into hers, slipping the flag into her grip. "If I don't make it back," he'd said, "don't let it die with me." She had promised, and promises were heavier than weapons. The squad stopped at a crossroads. The commander studied the map, lines etched with frustration on his face. The young soldier approached her, quiet, hesitant. "You don't plan on going back, do you?" he asked. She didn't answer. Her silence was enough. He swallowed hard. Why you? Why not someone else?" Her gaze lingered on the horizon. Then, softer than the wind, "Because I was the one who let him go." The young soldier froze. The words hung in the air, raw, jagged. He wanted to ask what she meant, but before he could, the commander barked orders. Movement resumed. The moment dissolved into the rhythm of boots and breath. But the words stayed with him. "I was the one who let him go." By midday, the squad reached the outskirts, a ridge overlooking the valley beyond. The world spread out before them, wide and merciless. Far in the distance, smoke curled where other battles burned. The commander checked his radio, cursed under his breath. "We're cut off. No support. No resupply. We're ghosts out here." Ghosts? The squad exchanged glances. Weariness, fear, but also something else. Resolve, because when you're already ghosts, you stop fearing death. She stood at the edge, the wind pulling at her hair, the flag tight in her hand. She thought of home again. The kitchen table, the laughter, the warmth she could never step back into. and she knew the only way forward was to keep carrying what he couldn't. That night under a black sky broken only by distant flares, she wrote in her notebook. Small, cramped words, not reports, not tactics, letters, one after another, to him, to herself, to the ghost she felt walking beside her. The young soldier, pretending to sleep nearby, opened his eyes just enough to see her hand trembling as she wrote. Not fear, not weakness, trembling from holding in everything she refused to let spill. He wanted to speak, to ask, to understand, but he didn't, not yet. Because even in silence, she spoke louder than any of them. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he wondered, what secret is she still hiding? What part of her story hasn't she told? The answer was coming, he could feel it. But when it came, it wouldn't be what he expected. Why did she keep writing letters no one would ever read? The young soldier watched her again that night, the glow of a dim red flashlight barely illuminating the pages on her lap. Her handwriting was small, almost desperate, as if cramming each word tighter could somehow hold back the tide inside her. She wrote until her hand cramped, then folded the paper, slid it carefully into the pocket of her pack beside the flag. He wanted to ask, but he didn't, because sometimes asking broke people open, and he wasn't sure she'd survive if she shattered now. The squad moved at dawn. Exhaustion clung to their bodies, but orders were orders: keep pushing, hold ground, wait for the call that never came. The valley spread before them, bleak and empty, the kind of place where silence felt staged, like a trap waiting to be sprung. She walked ahead again, always ahead, not charging, not reckless, just steady, like a metronome beating against chaos. Halfway down the ridge, the commander signaled a halt. He crouched low, scanning with binoculars. Movement, east side, stay sharp. The squad flattened, breaths held. The young soldier pressed his cheek against dirt, peering through his sights. Shadows flickered in the ruins below. Maybe 2, maybe 20. Hard to tell. Minutes dragged, nothing happened. Then the commander cursed under his breath. We're being watched. That knowledge was worse than gunfire. At least with shooting, you knew where death came from. Watching meant waiting. Waiting meant dread. They stayed low, moving carefully into the bones of another village. This one less destroyed, more abandoned. Doors hung open, chairs left toppled, children's shoes scattered in dust. It smelled of lives interrupted. She stopped at one doorway, bent down, picked up a small toy, a wooden horse, cracked at the neck. She turned it in her fingers, silent, then set it gently back on the step as if returning it might restore what was lost. The young soldier saw her face then, not stone, not steel, but soft, almost breaking. And he knew this war had already taken more from her than bullets ever could. By midday they dug in, sandbags, firing lines, a skeleton defense for a squad too small, too tired. The commander moved among them, checking weapons, checking morale. His voice was clipped, businesslike, hiding his own fear beneath layers of command. When he reached her, he paused. Not long, just enough to let their eyes meet. Then he gave a small nod, one soldier to another, nothing spoken, but she understood. He wasn't nodding to her skill. He was nodding to her burden. The squad waited, hours stretched. The heat pressed down, thick and unforgiving. Sweat stung eyes, dirt-caked skin, hunger gnawed, and still no attack. Waiting was worse. Waiting was always worse. That night, under a sky streaked with silent lightning, the young soldier finally spoke. Not to her, to the group. His voice was shaky but loud enough. Back home, he said, I used to fix cars. My dad had a shop, grease under my nails every day, hated it, wanted out, thought war would be, I don't know, cleaner. A few chuckles, bitter, human. He looked at her then. Guess we're all carrying something, huh? She didn't answer, but the way her hands tightened around the flag said enough. Later, when the others drifted toward restless sleep, he tried again, quiet just for her. You said you let him go. What did you mean? Her eyes lifted, catching the faint light. She didn't look angry, didn't look pained, just tired. "He asked me not to," she whispered. "The night before his last mission. He begged me to stop him, to tell him not to board that plane, said if I asked, he'd stay." Her breath caught a pause. "I didn't, I told him to go." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was crushing. The young soldier swallowed. "You couldn't have known." "Yes, I could," she cut in, not sharp, not cruel, just final. "I knew the risk, and I still let him go." Her gaze fell back to the flag in her lap, fingers brushing the fabric like skin. "This isn't just for him, it's for me, for what I didn't stop." The soldier said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Morning broke with the sound of engines. Not theirs. Distant, rolling, growing louder. The squad scrambled, weapons up, adrenaline surging. The commander barked orders, positioning them in cover. Through binoculars, dust trails rose on the horizon. Vehicles, armed, too many. The commander's jaw tightened. "We hold as long as we can, no retreat." The squad braced, heartbeats thundered, fingers on triggers. The young soldier muttered a prayer, lips dry. And she stood once more at the front, the flag tucked into her vest, her eyes calm. Because this was what she had been walking toward all along. Not survival, not safety, but the chance to make her silence mean something. The vehicles drew closer, shadows spilled from them, dozens of figures fanning out. The commander raised his hand, waited, then dropped it. Gunfire ripped through the valley. The world turned to thunder. Why didn't she blink? The first wave of gunfire shattered the air, bricks exploding into dust, walls cracking under the force. The squad ducked, pressed hard against cover, their rifles barking back in desperate rhythm. But she didn't flinch, didn't blink. Her eyes tracked the field like a hunter who had already accepted the hunt might end her. The young soldier risked a glance, firing bursts until the barrel smoked. He shouted over the chaos, "We can't hold this, there's too many." The commander's voice cut sharp, "We hold." But even he knew. You could hear it in the way his words strained, in the edge of his tone. Orders were a shield, but shields cracked. The enemy pressed closer. Shadows darted between ruins, muzzle flashes stabbing the dark. Grenades rattled, shrapnel clawed the air. The squad was outnumbered 3-1, maybe more. And still, they stayed. She rose higher than the rubble, her rifle steady, her silhouette framed by lightning splitting the clouds. One shot, two, three. Each a clean strike, each dropping a figure before they could close the gap. Her calm steadied the others, even as fear knotted their guts. The young soldier stared at her in fragments, between his own bursts of fire, between reloading, between breaths that felt too shallow. How could she move like that? Not reckless, not panicked, just precise. Like she was already where she was supposed to be. Minutes blurred into a storm of sound and smoke. The commander barked coordinates into a dead radio, static mocking him with silence. Ammunition thinned, morale thinned, but still, she fought, the flag pressed against her chest as if it gave her strength. Then it happened. A grenade landed inside the room they were using as cover. Time slowed. The squad froze. The metal canister hissed at their feet, seconds from tearing them apart. And she moved. Without a sound, without hesitation, she grabbed it, kicked off the wall, threw herself out the doorway, the grenade clutched in her hand. The explosion tore through the air behind her, fire and dust swallowing her figure. The young soldier screamed her name. He didn't realize he had. When the smoke cleared, she was still there. On her knees, ears ringing, uniform shredded by shrapnel, blood seeping into the dirt, but alive. She looked down at her hand, torn open, shaking, and closed it tight again, as if daring it to stop her. The commander's voice cracked, not with command but with something raw. "Get her back, get her covered." But she refused. She pushed herself up, staggered, raised her rifle again. Blood ran down her arm, but her aim never wavered. The young soldier crawled to her side, shouting over the roar of battle. "You're hit, you need." Her eyes cut to his, fierce, final. "I don't need anything but this." She tapped her vest where the flag was folded. And he understood. She wasn't staying alive for herself. She was staying alive for what she carried. The fight dragged on. Ammunition dwindled to nothing. Hands fumbled with empty magazines, curses hissed through clenched teeth. They fought with what they had, knives, fists, sheer will. And then silence. The last echoes of gunfire faded into the valley. Smoke drifted. Bodies lay sprawled in the dirt, enemy and ally alike. The squad, what was left of them, gasped for air, eyes wide with the disbelief of survival. She stood among them, bloodied, exhausted, the flag still pressed against her chest. But the silence wasn't peace, it was warning. The commander scanned the horizon, his face grim. That was only the first wave. The words cut deeper than bullets. The squad exchanged glances, fear, defeat, the weight of inevitability. And she simply adjusted the strap on her vest, tightened her grip on her rifle, and looked ahead. Because this wasn't about surviving wave after wave. This was about lasting long enough to plant meaning where others had fallen. They moved what bodies they could, stacking sandbags, dragging ammo from the fallen. Every motion carried the heaviness of knowing it might not matter. The young soldier's hands shook as he reloaded, dirt and blood mixing on his fingers. He looked at her again, needing something, words, hope, anything. She gave none, just presence. But later, when night fell, when the world turned quiet again, he asked, his voice small, almost breaking. "Why do you keep standing? Why not sit, just for a moment?" Her eyes softened, just enough for the mask to slip. "Because if I stop," she whispered, "I might not start again." The words gutted him, more than gunfire ever could. The squad slept in fragments, one eye open, one hand on their weapons. She didn't sleep. She sat by the window, the flag draped across her knees, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the next storm would rise. The young soldier woke once, eyes heavy, throat dry. He saw her silhouetted against the moonlight, motionless. And he thought, she looks like she belongs to another world, not ours, not theirs, something in between. He wanted to ask her more, about him, about the promise, about why she carried guilt heavier than her pack, but he didn't, because some answers, he realized, might break both the giver and the receiver. At dawn the sound returned, engines, boots, the second wave. The commander rallied what was left of them, his voice hoarse, breaking. "We hold, one more time, one more line." The squad braced. She rose, adjusted the flag, and whispered words only the wind carried. "This time I won't let go." And as the shadows poured down the ridge, as gunfire began again, she stood taller than any of them. Because sacrifice wasn't in dying, it was in refusing to bend before the end. Why did the second wave sound louder than the first? The squad heard them before they saw them, boots pounding, engines snarling, the low roar of men who believed they were already victorious. It was a sound meant to break you before the first shot was fired, and for most, it did. The young soldier's chest tightened. His fingers dug into the grip of his rifle until his knuckles turned white. He whispered to himself, not prayer, not courage, just survival. "Not yet, please, not yet." The commander shouted orders, voice cracking from strain, but he knew the truth. Everyone did. They were too few, too broken. And still she stood. She stepped into the open again, flag tight against her vest, eyes locked on the ridge spilling with shadows. There was no hesitation in her stance, no fear in the way she lifted her rifle. She had already made peace with the math. This wave was stronger and they might not make it through. But if they fell, it wouldn't be faceless. It wouldn't be meaningless. The first rounds cracked across the valley. Stone burst. Dust filled lungs. The air became jagged with the sound of war. The young soldier stayed low, firing in bursts, heart hammering. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw her again, upright, precise, unshakable. And for the first time, something inside him shifted. It wasn't just awe. It wasn't just fear. It was a realization. She wasn't fighting for herself at all. She was fighting so they could. Minutes bled into chaos. Ammo dwindled. Voices strained. The commander dragged a wounded man behind cover, blood trailing like ink across the dirt. The young soldier scrambled to help, hands slick, ears ringing. And she moved forward. Not back, not sideways, forward, into the storm. The young soldier shouted, desperate, "What are you doing? You'll get cut down." She didn't answer. Her focus was locked, eyes burning with something beyond survival. When the squad followed her gaze, they saw it. A machine gun nest setting up across the square. If it locked in, none of them would last minutes. She sprinted before anyone could stop her. Bullets stitched the ground at her heels, chipped walls at her shoulders. She dove into the ruin, knife flashing, silence breaking in a burst of violence too quick to process. Seconds later, the nest fell quiet. And she emerged again, blood on her hands, breath sharp but alive. The young soldier stared, heart pounding. She wasn't superhuman. She wasn't invincible. She was bleeding, bruised, shaking beneath the mask she wore, but she refused to stop. The squad clung to her presence. She became more than a soldier. She became the line they measured themselves against. Hours later, the wave broke. Not because they crushed it, but because the attackers pulled back, regrouping, leaving the village carved into silence again. The squad collapsed into rubble, chests heaving, eyes hollow. The commander sat with his back to a wall, head in his hands. "We can't take another," he muttered. "If they come again, that's it." No one argued. The young soldier crawled to where she sat, her arm wrapped in bloodied cloth, her face pale. She had taken shrapnel in her side, and every breath looked like fire. Yet she held the flag as if it were the only thing keeping her alive. He lowered his voice. "Why do you keep carrying it, even now, when you can barely stand?" Her eyes lifted, and for the first time they broke. Tears gathered, held back by sheer force of will, but they glistened in the moonlight. "Because if I put it down," she whispered, "I lose him all over again." The soldier swallowed hard. His chest ached with a weight he hadn't carried before. She looked away, voice trembling now, unguarded. "I told him to go. I told him I'd be fine. I lied. He died thinking I didn't need him. And this," she pressed the fabric tighter, "this is the only way I can tell him I was wrong." Her words carved into him, not just grief, not just guilt, but confession. He wanted to answer, to tell her she wasn't to blame, but he knew it wouldn't matter. Some truths couldn't be softened by words. That night no one slept. The horizon burned faintly with enemy fires. The squad whispered in fragments about home, about regrets, about what they'd do if they somehow made it back. The commander admitted he had a daughter he hadn't seen in 2 years. Another soldier confessed he used to be a teacher, that sometimes he dreamed of chalk instead of gunpowder. And she sat apart, listening, silent, until finally she spoke. "When this is over," she said softly, "don't remember me as a fighter. Remember me as someone who carried something heavier than herself." The squad went quiet. Her words weren't dramatic, they weren't grand, they were simply truth. Dawn bled slowly into the valley. The air was thick with waiting. The young soldier sat close to her now, as if distance itself felt unsafe. He wanted to keep her talking, to keep her tethered to something beyond her grief. "Was he like you?" he asked gently. "The one who gave you the flag?" Her lips curved in the faintest shadow of a smile. "No, he was better. He had light in him. I just borrowed it." The soldier frowned, and when he left, her eyes hardened. The light went with him. The moment hung heavy, but before he could say more, the commander's voice cut through. "They're coming again." The third wave, stronger, closer. This one meant to end it. The squad braced once more. And she pushed herself to her feet, staggering but unbroken, flag secured across her chest. Because she had promised. And promises don't end until you do. Why did the silence feel sharper than the gunfire? The village lay still, holding its breath. The dawn mist curled through broken windows and shattered beams, cloaking the ruins in a pale, haunting veil. Somewhere out there, beyond the fog, beyond the silence, the enemy gathered. The commander's voice was low, almost reverent. This is it. No one argued. The squad knew. The third wave wouldn't retreat. This one was designed to erase them. The young soldier clenched his rifle, pulse thundering. His body begged him to run, to vanish into the fog, but his feet stayed rooted. He kept glancing at her, the woman with the flag pressed tight against her chest, blood still seeping through her bandage, face pale with exhaustion. She looked breakable now, fragile, and yet unmovable. The silence broke. It began with the drumbeat of boots, then engines snarling, then the chorus of voices, thick with certainty, rolling across the valley like a storm front. The young soldier flinched. The commander barked orders, steadying his men, but his eyes betrayed him. He knew what they all knew: this was the end. She stood. Her knees trembled, her breath caught sharp, but she rose with the flag slung across her shoulder. For a fleeting second, the squad stared at her like she was carved from something beyond flesh. The young soldier's voice cracked. You can't keep doing this." She turned her head, gaze steady, voice raw but unshaken. "I don't keep doing it." A pause. "It keeps me." And then the third wave hit. The earth shook with the force of it. Bullets ripped through stone and dirt. Grenades shattered what little cover remained. The squad split, scrambling, each man carving a desperate corner of survival. The commander's shouts drowned in the roar of war. The young soldier fired blindly, teeth clenched, praying his aim meant something. Dust choked him. Heat burned his lungs. He barely noticed when someone screamed his name until a hand yanked him down. She had pulled him into cover, her own body shielding his. A round sliced through her sleeve. Another punched the wall inches from her head. She didn't flinch. He gasped wide-eyed, "Why me?" She didn't answer. She just shoved him forward, back into the fight, as if her own body was already spent currency. Minutes blurred into slaughter. The attackers pressed harder, closer. The squad was breaking, folding, voices falling silent one by one. And then the sound. A horn, sharp, piercing, cutting through chaos like a blade. The enemy's horn, a signal. The commander's head snapped up, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "They're calling in armor." The words dropped like stone. Armor. No rifle, no courage, no line of defense could stand against that. The squad froze, every man feeling the weight of inevitability. Except her. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the square. Through smoke and ruin she caught sight of it, the old fuel dump, half buried beneath collapsed roofs, forgotten in the chaos, volatile, dangerous. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. Her silence carried its own command. The young soldier followed her gaze and understood. His chest tightened, his throat closed. "No," he whispered, "you'll never make it." Her expression softened just for him, for the boy who still carried fear in his bones. "Then watch me." Before anyone could stop her, she rose. Flag strapped to her back, side bleeding, every step a war of its own. She ran. Through smoke, through bullets, through the impossible. The squad shouted, screamed, cursed her name. The commander called for cover fire, voices breaking under the weight of desperation. The young soldier fired until his rifle clicked empty, every round a prayer, every shot a plea. "Come on, come on." She broke through, reached the dump, threw herself across rusted drums and shattered planks. And then silence. Time fractured. The young soldier blinked through smoke and dust, searching for her shape. He saw her barely, bent low, striking flint against metal. Again, again, hands trembling, sparks falling, catching. And then the fire spread. It licked across the dump, hungry, alive. The enemy's advance slowed, confused, their horns silenced by sudden realization. And she turned one last time. Her eyes met the squad's, no words, just a look that said everything. I carried it this far, now you carry me. And then the world erupted. Flame consumed the dump, ripping skyward in a roar of heat and thunder. The blast swallowed armor, men, stone, and silence itself. The shockwave threw the squad to the ground, ears ringing, bodies battered. When the dust cleared, the valley was still. No voices, no horns, no footsteps. Just ruin. The squad staggered upright, dazed, coughing, alive. Against all odds, alive. But the young soldier stumbled toward the blast site, chest aching. He searched the wreckage with shaking hands, heart tearing itself apart. The commander caught his arm, voice rough. Don't. But he pulled free, crawling over stone and flame-scorched earth. And there, beneath ash and steel, he found it. The flag. Charred, torn, but whole. His hands shook as he lifted it, pressing it to his chest. She was gone. The silence that followed was heavier than any battle. No one spoke, no one could. The young soldier clutched the flag, eyes burning, body trembling. He wanted to scream, to collapse, to undo what had just happened. But instead he rose, slowly. Because she had asked. Because she had shown him how. The squad gathered around him. No words, just presence, just weight. And for the first time since the war began, the young soldier understood what dignity looked like. It wasn't medals, it wasn't survival. It was carrying something heavier than yourself, even when it cost everything. Why did the air feel heavier when the fighting was over? The valley was silent, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that pressed against your chest, that made every breath taste like ash. The ruins still smoked. The ground still trembled faintly from the blast. And in the center of it all stood the young soldier, flag in his hands, body shaking. The others watched him. No one dared to speak, not even the commander. She was gone. And yet in some unbearable way she was. The young soldier tightened his grip on the fabric, charred edges rough against his fingers. He didn't want to let it go. Couldn't. His throat ached, his eyes burned, his mind replayed the moment again and again, her turning back, her gaze steady, her final silent command. Carry me. He had wanted to be saved, and she had saved him, but not in the way he had begged for. The commander finally broke the silence, his voice cracked and hollow. We move. No one argued. The squad gathered what little remained of their supplies. Weapons were near useless now, ammunition scarce. They were alive but stripped, broken. The young soldier stayed at the edge of the blast crater longer than the rest. He couldn't tear himself away. His boots sank into the ash, his ears rang with phantom echoes of her voice, though she had rarely spoken at all. He wanted one more word, one more order, one more anything. But there was nothing. He pressed the flag against his chest, a promise in silence. Then he turned and followed. The march away from the village was slow, every step weighted by exhaustion and absence. The commander limped, his face drawn. Another soldier dragged his leg, jaw clenched against the pain. None of them complained. None of them dared. They didn't have her anymore, and so they had to carry each other. Hours passed. The sun cut harsh lines across the barren hills. The heat pressed down. Their canteens ran dry. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound became a trick of nerves. The young soldier kept to the rear, flag strapped across his back as she had worn it. His shoulders ached. His breath stuttered. But he refused to loosen it, refused to let it fall. One of the older men slowed beside him, voice gravelly. She'd be proud. The boy shook his head, jaw tight. She wouldn't care about pride. The older man studied him for a moment, then nodded. You're right, she'd care that you didn't stop. The words dug deep but not painfully. They steadied him. By nightfall they reached the ridge. The valley stretched behind them, a graveyard of smoke and silence. Ahead, darkness. No map, no clear way out, just the endless unknown. They set camp in silence, too tired for words. The commander sat apart, staring at the ground as if expecting answers to rise from the dirt. The others lay back, whispering fragments of memory, regrets, names of people they might never see again. The young soldier sat alone, flag across his lap. He traced the stitches with his fingers, the fabric frayed but unbroken. Every tear in it felt like part of her. And finally he spoke. Not to the squad, not to the commander. To her. I didn't understand, he whispered into the night. Not until now. You weren't trying to be stronger than everyone. You were just carrying him, carrying us. And now I have to carry you. His voice cracked. He pressed the flag tighter. I don't know if I can. The night gave no answer. Only the wind through stone, soft, almost like breath. He closed his eyes, and for the first time since the war began, he dreamed. In the dream, she was there. Not with blood, not with fire, just standing, flag over her shoulder, eyes steady. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. When he woke, the dream clung to him like morning mist. The march continued, days blurred. Hunger carved hollows in their faces, thirst parched their throats. The land itself seemed to fight them, and still they moved. The commander weakened first, his limp worsened, his shoulders sagged, but when one of the men offered to carry his pack, he refused. She carried more than this. I'll manage. The others didn't argue, they just nodded. The young soldier felt it then, the shift. Her presence lingered, not in ghost or shadow, but in them. Each man carried her differently. The commander in his pride, the older soldier in his quiet endurance, the boy himself in the weight of the flag. She was gone, and yet she was everywhere. One evening, as the sky bled red over the horizon, the commander gathered them close. His voice was hoarse, his words slow. If we make it back, it won't be as the same men who left. You know that. None of us can go back untouched, but if we do, we tell her story. The squad nodded, solemn. The young soldier swallowed hard. He felt the flag against his back, heavier than any rifle, any wound. He thought of her eyes, her silence, her unbroken steps. He whispered to himself, so soft no one else could hear, I'll tell it, even if I'm the last. The march dragged on. Nights grew colder, days stretched longer. Some men faltered, some fell and had to be lifted by others, but they kept moving. Because she had shown them how. One night, as the boy kept watch, the older soldier sat beside him, voice low. What do you see when you close your eyes? The boy hesitated, then answered honestly, her, always her. The older man nodded. Good, don't lose that. Sometimes memory is the only weapon left. The boy studied the horizon, flag draped across his knees. For the first time he realized he wasn't afraid anymore, not the way he had been. Her silence had taught him, her sacrifice had carved it into him. Fear wasn't something you outran, it was something you carried, and if you carried it long enough it became something else. Strength. By the seventh day their numbers had dwindled. Illness, wounds, exhaustion, the march had claimed its toll. The commander barely stood, his voice a rasp. The older soldier leaned heavily on a makeshift cane. But the boy still carried the flag. And when they finally saw it, the faint silhouette of their own lines across the horizon, something inside him broke. Relief, pain, hope, all at once. The commander whispered, barely audible, we made it. The squad straightened. Some wept, some laughed, some just collapsed where they stood. The boy didn't. He walked forward, flag lifted high, each step echoing sacrifice, dignity, unspoken strength. And for a moment the others didn't see a boy. They didn't see a soldier. They saw her. Alive in every step. Alive in the silence she left behind. Alive in the weight that would never be put down. Why did coming home feel heavier than the war? The squad crossed the last ridge at dusk, feet dragging, bodies bent but unbroken. Beyond the valley stretched their lines, tents, medics, soldiers who hadn't seen the battles they'd survived. Safety, or something that resembled it. The young soldier gripped the flag tighter, every step sharp with memory. He should have felt relief, joy, the taste of survival, but instead he felt the weight of absence pressing harder than ever. She should have been with them. The commander slowed as the first sentry spotted them. A whistle cut the air. Voices rose. Men rushed forward, disbelief painted across their faces. God, they're alive. The survivors were ushered in, hands pulling at their arms, guiding them toward medics, toward water, toward the fragile promise of rest. But the boy resisted. He clung to the flag, body shaking, refusing to let go even when a medic reached for it. The commander raised a hand. His voice was hoarse but firm. "Leave it, he carries it." And so he did. Through the camp, past rows of wide-eyed soldiers, past whispers of amazement and grief, the boy walked with the flag across his shoulders, head bowed, every step echoing hers. When they reached the center, the commander stopped. He turned to the men who had survived beside him, eyes heavy, then to the boy. "Tell them," he said softly. The boy froze, his chest clenched, his throat locked. How could words hold her? How could sound capture silence? But then he felt the flag against his skin, torn, frayed, unyielding. He closed his eyes and saw her again, standing against the storm, gaze steady, lips unspoken. And he began. His voice trembled at first, just fragments, the way she stood when no one else could, the way she carried weight beyond herself, the way she moved forward when retreat was easier, when survival made more sense. As he spoke, the camp quieted. Men gathered, drawn closer, their faces etched with something more than curiosity, respect, reverence. He told them about the second wave, about the machine gun nest, about the flag never leaving her hands, even when blood did. He told them about the fuel dump, the spark, the fire, her last look before the sky itself tore apart. And finally, he told them what she had whispered in the quiet hours, that she carried it not for pride, not for glory, but because it was the only way to keep the dead alive. When he finished, his voice broke. Silence fell again, a silence that carried her better than any word. The commander stepped forward, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. His own eyes were wet, his jaw tight. "She carried us. Now we carry her." The boy lowered the flag, folding it carefully, reverently, as if the fabric itself breathed. And for the first time, he let someone else touch it. The commander placed his hand over the cloth, bowing his head. One by one, the others did too. Not ceremony, not ritual, just weight shared. Days passed. The squad dispersed, some to medics, some to reports, some to the shadows where grief hides. But the boy couldn't let it go. He kept the flag by his side day and night. He cleaned its frayed edges, pressed it smooth against his chest, listened to the silence it carried. Until the morning, the commander approached him, quiet, steady. "There's a service, for those we lost, for her." The boy's throat tightened. She wouldn't want speeches. The commander nodded. "Then there won't be." At dawn, the squad gathered on the ridge overlooking the valley they had crossed. No podium, no fanfare, just earth, sky, and silence. The boy stood at the center, flag folded against his chest. He didn't speak. None of them did. They simply stood. Because dignity doesn't need words. After a long silence, the boy lifted the flag once more. High, against the rising sun, its frayed edges caught the light, glowing like fire. And in that moment, she was there. In every breath they drew. In every scar they carried. In every step they would take from that day forward. The boy lowered the flag slowly, pressing it back to his chest. He closed his eyes, whispering only to himself or maybe to her. "I'll carry you always." The commander placed a hand on his shoulder. The others stood close, not in formation, not in ceremony, just together. The ridge wind stirred the flag, soft, almost like breath. And the silence that followed was not heavy this time. It was full. It was her. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.